This is the Chingford, Walthamstow, Wanstead, Woodford, Leighton, and Leytonstone local Guardian. It's nothing to do with the other London Guardian known internationally. And there is this rare piece because this is not what usually the local quote newspapers carry. This is the one dated today, the 17th of December 2020, and 75 pence on the print copy or print issue. All right, this is the one that is really rare, absolutely rare, even a local paper. Even a local paper that is not owned by the corrupt and stupid Archant group, which owns most of the local papers, local titles that remain in London. So this is the piece that we have been reporting almost every day, every post in context. The council misled residents for years. Now that applies to Tower Hamlets Council on everything. And it could apply, in fact, it does apply to most other councils, including, especially, in particular, next door to Tower Hamlets, the Newham Borough Council. And this one is about the fire safety, but it could be applied with equal effective relevance to the council's lying about schools, about housing, about the environment, and especially about the millions of pounds that the council, each council, abuses and wastes. And in the cases of the corrupt councils like Croydon, the Croydon Council has been exposed as having been misled by a bunch of criminals posing as elected councillors who have now landed the people of Croydon with liabilities and debts in excess of, in effect, although publicly they don't say that figure, they say it's less than that, but it's actual costs and debts caused to Croydon's electors in excess of 2,000 million pounds, that is 2 billion pounds. And so, this piece by the Walthamstow Guardian series, let's say, or Waltham Forest Guardian series, says the Waltham Forest Council has been accused of misleading. They don't say misleading in the without quotation marks, they say it within quotation marks, and that is an unnecessary, unjustifiable mark of reluctance on the part of the paper, because the Waltham Forest Council has been a lying council for years. And in the context of the composition of the population and the behavior of the criminals making up the ruling kind of group on Waltham Forest Council, it has been led by racists, and any councillor with backgrounds, African or Asian backgrounds or Caribbean backgrounds, that may have been part of the ruling kind of clique, has been colluding with and complicit in the criminality and racism perpetrated for decades by the Waltham Forest Council. So this is not just about the fire safety. This is about everything else. And this also shows the corruption of those who have been kind of jumping on the bandwagon of the kind of slogan-based opportunities. Not every single one who has been attending, not currently attending because of the COVID restrictions, but who has been supporting the memorial events observed every month by the people remembering the victims of the Grenfell Tower massacre of 17th of June 2017. Now, this is not the detail, but the principle. This is a piece about Redbridge Council. Redbridge is also an East London council, so it's a question of the Redbridge Council refusing to recognize the concerns about disabled objectors to a particular plan. And the reason we have got this edition of the printed paper today is about these two items, and there are some others that cannot be automatically, let's say, accessed by random search of the internet, because that means prior knowledge of the topic being searched for. And you cannot have prior knowledge of billions of items that are on the internet and specifically target any of them. That means you would have to have that much time, which would take years to specifically focus on. So that is the disadvantage of relying on searches by the internet. Because on the printed page, you can see the item that you would not have necessarily predicted or expected to see. So that's why we have that paper, but that not the this also is related to our rejection of the complete pack of lies that Archant, that owns the local Tower Hamlets East London idiotizer and the next door neighbor kind of council-based papers, the Hackney Gazette and the Newham Recorder. These are all full of lies. Too much lying and too many lies. All right, so there is this Daily Mail. We had spotted the comments attributed to Jane Garvey, the woman who has been described as being aged 56 and a co-presenter on the program, Woman's Hour on the BBC Radio, leaving after 13 years. Her comments about transgender debate. And the Daily Mail is using the narrative that any restrictions on the occasion of Christmas is a bad thing, even if the restrictions are intended to and are felt necessary to reduce or protect or prevent the spread of the virus, which is rising in London. So they are saying that the restrictions during Christmas is frightening or frightful. Now, Christmas is not being treated in all the publicity by Fleet Street and the other media as having anything to do with any religion. They don't make any references to religion at all. So it is them that are debasing any sanctity that they had attached previously to the idea of quote Christmas. And Christmas remains very much a commercially promoted, materialistic, indulgence-related event or series of events or a pack of excuses for commerce and indulgence. Nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with compassion whatsoever. Any compassion that they actually exhibit towards the hungry or the lonely or the homeless, which is going to come in heavy kind of doses in the coming days. Coming days meaning this is just a week. Less than 10 days, like 8 days before the 25th of December. So in the next 7 to 8 days or 6 days, there will be very heavy duty references to Christmas, the homeless, and the hungry and all the rest of it. And there will not be any explaining by any of the main kind of agencies and sources that are given the main platform by Fleet Street and the counterparts in the radio and television networks. There won't be any explanation as to why in a country which literally, openly, brazenly robs the state, that is, robs the society and economy of hundreds of billions by wasting that money on the likes of HS2, high-speed 2 railway link, overhyped for connecting London with Birmingham as the main kind of expanse, if you like, or the line. When there is growing evidence that railway trips in England are becoming made increasingly more unaffordable because of the rising fares and the rising anti-socialization and over-capitalization of the owners and operators of the railway lines that do already exist, which takes it to the second stage. Why then is this hype about the need for high speed? No study, no scientific study, no even business study has revealed any need for speed being increased in the railway kind of trips, thus apparently, allegedly reducing the traveling time, journey time, let's say from 1 hour to 40 minutes. I mean, what difference does that make? And what has happened on the environment? What has happened in the country to cause that claim to be made? Now, hundreds of billions of pounds being wasted on things like HS2, high-speed railway link 2, while the poverty rate and the poverty number are increasing, directly caused by the government and the state refusing to help end the poverty. And the poverty that exists could be ended by the government if it wanted to apply the money, the resources that are available, that are being kind of put in the pocket of big business contractors for no economic benefit to the economy at all. So poverty could be reduced in 1 year, and housing could be resolved within 1 year. But there is no urgency, there is no even talk about doing that, let alone action for doing that. So there is a kind of big piece in the Daily Mail about too many women suffering from eating disorder. And here is a Daily Mail, again the contradiction that we have been talking about Brexit. Again promoting Boris Johnson, who is the cause for the deadlock, as being the person who is responsible for bringing about the breakthrough. That is what they're saying every day. There is Johnson who is to be given credit for solving the problem that he is consistently making worse every day. And the Daily Mail is ferociously promoting Boris Johnson. And Stephen Glover, the epitome of the Daily Mail contradictions, is back on running a headline that misleads the reader to thinking that he is being critical of Boris Johnson, but he's not. His headline says, twin tests ahead that will prove whether Boris Johnson is just bluster. Bluster means just hot air, too much talk and no action. And the Daily Mail is boastfully recording this headline. 137,000 people in Britain get vaccine in the first week. It cannot say how many of the vaccines will be effective and how many of them will be really safe. And then it has got an admission again about care homes where the elderly people are kind of supposedly being cared for, but they're not cared for. That's why they've been massacred in the past wave. So they're saying the care home chaos as visitors are still barred. Now, it is not the visitors' access that is being mishandled. It is the safety of the care home residents and their rights and their actual freedom and the respect that they deserve but have been denied by the so-called care homes managers or management. And there is a rare piece in the Daily Mail, which is a completely corrupt kind of Little Englander, stupidly agendaed, idiotic denier of the truth. And this is where the truth is. It's an accidental truth, which is the United Nations Children's Fund, which is called in brief UNICEF, is stepping in to feed hungry British children. Can you imagine? We just said earlier in the last 15 minutes about the HS2 billions who wasted. So that's where the admission is. But the admission is reduced to the bottom of a page, inside page, rather than being given the prominence it really deserves as the front page splash, which is where it should be, instead of the stupid Christmas kind of restriction thing. And it says about the UNICEF stepping in, and it says some 1,800 families struggling as a result of the pandemic will receive breakfast boxes over the school holidays. The Food Power for Generation COVID initiative has been made possible thanks to £25,000 grant from UNICEF, United Kingdom. Just compare that amount with the billions Johnson is putting into the pocket of big contractor farm criminals under the cover of HS2. And it has got an item about 555 public service employees each getting more than £150,000 a year. And they've got another piece for racists' right to spread hatred at universities. And a very rare headline. A Jewish priest called Rabbi is reportedly concerned about Muslims in China, ordeal of Muslims in China. Now that is absolutely not normal, and it's not absolutely nothing to do with the priority given to the rights of Muslims in China. It is part of the diplomatic kind of contest that is led by the USA and being joined in by its so-called allies in confrontation with China, not about upholding the human rights of the Muslims in China being persecuted by the Chinese. And Alex Brumer, the city editor, that is City of London, the financial editor, that is attacking environmentalists who are protesting against the Heathrow terminal, airport runway extension that has been given the go-ahead. And there is a completely bogus piece about eviction. That Donald Trump is being told by Florida neighbors not to move to Florida after White House eviction. Trump is not being evicted from the White House. Trump has finished his kind of occupation of White House anyway. Now, in this piece about the UK government, Crown Prosecution Service, a new guidelines banning courts from using the word gangs or gang. Courts urged to avoid using word because of negative connotations. And it says that it's a piece by Rebecca Kemba, C-A-M-B-E-R, Kemba, described as a chief crime correspondent. Courts have been told to try to avoid saying criminals are in a gang because the word has negative connotations. Now, this is not something that the Daily Mail actually examines. That is to say, the actual behavior of criminal gangs operating right across England, especially on council estates, where the local councils and the local police have, in effect, banned or barred any action against criminals. Not only have they therefore allowed gangs to operate freely, they have also colluded in the creation of a climate of impunity from accountability and prosecution. So the CPS, that is the Crown Prosecution Service, which Keir Starmer headed for 5 years, the CPS in England and Wales within a bracket, the CPS is continuing the agenda of decriminalizing most crimes. The decriminalization having been led for decades by the police, which is unconstitutional. Now in France, about crime, there is this racist kind of over-the-top behavior by the courts. Court last night handed out more than 200 years of prison sentences to 14 accomplices. Now, there is no way that these people would be alive 200 years. In the Charlie Hebdo attackers who killed 17 people in Paris in 2015, but that court decision is absolutely political. The court is actually trying to ingratiate the court system and the court itself, or the judges themselves, to the narrative, to the agenda being fronted by the lying President Emmanuel Macron, who has been engaged in inciting anti-Muslim hatred all over again in order to keep his, quote, appeal to the non-Muslims and the anti-Muslims in France among the electors. This is not only not going to solve the tension, let alone bring an end to racism in France, but it's going to make things worse. All fronts of the confrontation between Muslims and anti-Muslims and racists will get inflamed into misunderstanding and miscommunications and misinterpretations of everything. And let me say this, no part, absolutely no part of Islam sanctions any violence against people who are not engaged in violent attacks themselves. That is, attacks on Muslims against themselves. So there is no basis for including Muslims in the narrative that they are part of any violent agenda. This is very important. If there is evidence, then by all means do the necessary arrest and prosecution and sentencing of the convicted ones responsible for violence, whether they're Muslims or whether they're not Muslims. But do not make a special case that Muslims are in any way, shape, or form criminally more liable than their counterparts from other backgrounds. And there is this piece from New York, Dateline New York, two-page piece on pages 34 and 35 of the Daily Mail today, Thursday, the 17th of December, 2020, which says, Brenda, that is the Queen Elizabeth's son, Andrew, and the other Orgy Island, where in the Bahamas, very young women are seen almost naked dancing near a man called Nygaard, with whom Andrew was involved in sexually abusing girls. And this is the piece, the two-page print of the spread that they have got on the Daily Mail. What the Daily Mail does not say, and what the others don't comment on either, others, that is, the other tabloids and Fleet Street papers, is that criminals in Brenda's family are getting impunity from charges, from arrests, from prosecutions over crimes for which other people, ordinary members of the public, would be immediately arrested, prosecuted, and charged. So Brenda is being abused by the criminals in our family as a cover. And that is horrible. She said, annus horribilis. After the year when Diana was murdered by the murderers, whoever the murderers were, in that staged car crash in the tunnel in France. But the horribilis is a misrepresentation of her experience in comparison with the victims of injustice and the victims of lying by the state, who number in the hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And Buckingham Palace and Brenda have been consistent in maintaining the silence of her crimes and criminality. Whereas in contrast to that, Brenda has been strategically crafty to have her role in bringing about Brexit and opposing the Scottish independence getting released by accident, arranged accidental, quote, blunders by the likes of Cameron and others, and the tabloid papers. So our diagnosis today about the Fleet Street papers includes an updated version of the diagnosis of the role of the monarchy fronted by Elizabeth II. She has been hailed as a neutral, as an able, and as a much widely deserved kind of recipient of public respect in the UK because of her alleged impartial, neutral, and honest role. But the evidence is that that is far from the truth. And the racist braying, the racist harassment, and the racist attacks against Meghan Markle is directly connected with Brenda's attitude itself. She has not condemned the racist hostility being shown against Meghan Markle because of her ethnicity. Whatever the ethnic details, Meghan Markle is not seen as an Anglo-Saxon. And so therefore she is treated as, quote, legitimate target for attacks by the racists, which is continuing every day. In every little footnote and every little kind of side note that is carried by Fleet Street, Meghan Markle is being attacked under any excuse, under pretext. And none of the gossips that are retailed by Fleet Street from the unknown sources or unattributed or unidentified sources can be distanced from the agenda that suits the monarch, Brenda, Elizabeth II. So she has not commented at all in defense of Meghan Markle against the racists. in Fleet Street and headed by the Fleet Street, and also in the rest of the mainstream British media and a lot of so-called social media races. There is a contradictory piece in the I newspaper by Boris Johnson, of course. And he's being given a soft kind of promotion and being painted as somebody who is against the relaxation of the lockdown at the Christmas. But that's absolute rubbish. The virus cannot be treated as a person who discriminates. So therefore, the legal threat issued by Gavin Williamson, by Johnson against Greenwich Council is part of Boris Johnson's lying agenda. Keeping schools open is completely inconsistent with the Tier 3 being imposed in London. And every single page contains contradictory items about the handling of the pandemic. And Rishi Sunak is now saying that he will start public sector cutbacks. And there will be no more borrowing, he's saying. And in a piece by Serena Sandim and Heather Saul, the headline is "5.7 million people are claiming benefits," that is welfare benefit, poverty benefit. Almost double the number of people claiming that same set of benefits in March. So they're saying under society, pandemic helps change attitudes towards those claiming benefits. But I have to say that is a complete fantasy. That is not true. What they are claiming is that people claiming benefits are being treated with less hostility, let's say, not more sympathy, but less hostility. Not quite the same thing. It is hostile, still hostile, but only tempered, that is reduced by the general propaganda of being caring about society. And the Supreme Court has given the go-ahead for the third runway, which has been treated as a very serious threat to the environment. And the Supreme Court yesterday gave the ruling. We shall be talking about that and also about the rare item about Tim Crossland, one of the campaigners and a lawyer, licensed law trader, who broke the embargo that embargo, the restriction, the ban on publishing the ruling of the court. Now, this is supposed to be a country of freedom of the press. So why did the court want to have an embargo on its own ruling about the fact that it had given the go-ahead for the environmentally destructive third runway project? And this is a headline by the Daily Star, having a go at Harry and Meghan Markle making a deal with the American media firm Spotify. And it's saying that Spotify is behaving as a gullible firm. Remember the word gullible. It, of course, is not anything of the sort. It is a firm that makes other people gullible. But let's read the rest of it. The Daily Star London is saying of Spotify, this gullible firm, that is Spotify, is handing out oodles of cash, that is lots of cash, to completely normal, publicity-shy members of the public. And then it says, so where do we join the queue? That is normal people. And it's a piece by Jeffrey Lawton. Music firm Spotify is facing a backlash after it agreed to hand squillions of pounds to a publicity-shy couple to bore on about crap. Now, crap is an obscene word. And here it is being given a magnified shape on the front page. Dear Spotify, when can the rest of us have 30 million pounds for talking crap as well, please? Now, we agree with the discrimination shown by, with the description of the discrimination shown by Spotify in this. But we also point out the racist kind of connotation there. They haven't published anything similar about the receipt of any money or benefit or perks by Wills and Kate Middleton. And they wouldn't. Even more scandalously, the Daily Star, which is part of the Beaverbrook poisonous kind of racist outlet, the Daily Express, which suppresses the truth, thus being renamed by us as the Daily Suppress. When the Heathrow third runway is given the go-ahead yesterday, that entails a lot more damaging impact on the health of the public than Spotify's giving the contract to Harry and Meghan. So why is the Daily Star not giving any space to that decision by the Supreme Court? Because the Daily Star is a corrupt and, in this context, racist publication. And here is a corrupt plug for the victims of the injustice of the justice system. This is a treble-barreled lie. Because for a start, there is nothing called the justice system in England. So that's a lie. The second thing is that the Daily Star would never, ever even acknowledge the fact that every day, every single day, people of African, Asian backgrounds and origins, the majority of whom are born and brought up in England, are being treated racistly by various parts of the state, including by the Crown Prosecution Service, including by all the courts, bureaucracies right across the country, including by the police, and including by the main agenda and narrative run by the UK state and its central departments, the Home Office, and all the ministries, and by the local councils, regardless of the fact of who the elected local councils are. That is including people of African origin who may be elected local councillors. And there is a piece about 437 million pounds Kylie. So she is revealed as the 2020 top earning celeb. It's Kylie Jenner. Fashion icon Kylie Jenner has been named the highest earning celebrity of 2020. The Keeping Up with the Kardashians star has raked in an incredible 437 million pounds this year, largely thanks to selling 51% of her cosmetics company to Coty, according to data compiled by Forbes magazine. Now, that is not a really truthful, accurate, representative economic or social item of news. It doesn't represent reality whatsoever. It's a fantasy, and it is a fantasy that is kept up and kept funded, kept afloat by the gullibles in the public in the USA and everywhere else where this thing has been sold and promoted. And the Guardian is continuing to refer to Boris Johnson as PM. Now, PM actually raises the status of Johnson to one that belongs only to and is deserved only by holder of that post of prime minister, who is not a liar, who is not an opportunist, who is not a racist, and who is not a crook. And they're running the same line as the Daily Mail. And on pages 4 and 5, The Guardian, which has become embarrassingly kind of fake news generating appreciator of certain members of the African origin persons in this country. In the wake of the racist trendies' decision to join the club of white appreciators of the Black Lives Movement. And there is this other piece about the Heathrow decision by the Supreme Court. And the headline about Wales is like the Daily Mail. It is actually a negative headline in the sense that it is not, the Guardian is not happy that Wales is sticking to a rigorous, compared to the English counterpart arrangements, a rigorous regime of restrictions like lockdown during Christmas. And the only criticism of Boris Johnson in the Guardian is in the sketch by John Crace. His headline says, "It's business as usual. More Prime Minister's questions than answers from our Chansa PM." Now, Chansa is a kind of colloquial word which means a liar, an opportunist. And it says that it all comes down to a matter of personal preference. In the first of the Prime Minister's questions, the Tory MP Michael Fabricant had described Keir Starmer as a sort of smarmy lawyer from the country that the country didn't want. Shame, then, he didn't think to mention the alternative on offer. A narcissistic opportunist chancer who is only on nodding terms with reality and has been sacked at least twice for lying. On balance, given the year we have all just had, most would choose a former director of public prosecutions. But there is no accounting for taste. He's having a go at Michael Fabricant. Now, Fabricant, whom we do not want to promote the image of, because Fabricant is one of those festering sicknesses that constitute a big, degenerating, disgraceful part of the British House of Commons. And there is a piece about Greater Manchester and Andy Barnum, who is the elected mayor, where Barnum is being Barnum is asking for a tier 2 to be applied to a large part of Greater Manchester. And they've got a piece about 6 months of the briefing on COVID, led by male ministers. And this gives a picture of Priti Patel as a symbol of the women unrepresented. And there is a piece about the police sharing abuse cases data with the Home Office to be stopped or to be limited. As with the Daily Mail, the Guardian is absolutely, totally corrupt. And it's the Guardian is totally understating the damage. And Martin Kettle in the Guardian, one of the craftiest Guardian writers, making a career by treble-faced opportunistic trendiness, has got a piece about Dominic Cummings having left, and he asks, is this the dawn of a more consensual era? There is no factual basis, no justification. And there is this piece about in the Guardian 2, G2, where on pages 4 and 5, under Black Lives, it says we had to be our own banks. The point I made earlier about persons of African origin, background, but the Guardian's display of pieces on the experience of African origin people in this country do not tell the truth. They don't tell the truth about the context, and they don't tell the truth about the majority of the people who are in struggle and are from African and Caribbean backgrounds but are in struggle. Because the Guardian only chooses to carry pieces that don't really challenge, let alone oppose, racism of the media on the Fleet Street. And what that actually entails and reflects and represents and typifies. Because the Guardian itself is a daily reminder of the racist narrative. What that means is that the Guardian obstructs and leaves out and suppresses and hides the truth of 90% or more of the experiences of people from African and Asian backgrounds, experiences of racism, racist discrimination, which means the vast majority of society, the mainstream so-called, is racist, and the Guardian is with them. So to put Black Lives Matter as the kind of theme of any piece in The Guardian about the obstruction in the financial market and the financial institutions and the racism involved in the causing of the aggravated housing crisis experienced by people of African and Asian origin, is not telling the truth of what is going on. And The Guardian will never tell the truth. As the piece by, as the pieces by Suzanne Moore have reminded of. Because when The Guardian sacked Germaine Greer, another Australian like Suzanne Moore, as a writer of a column, The Guardian did that typically Guardian-like dishonesty and betrayal. And the fact that The Guardian was, for a long time, distorting the pieces written by Suzanne Moore and kind of disappearing her actual kind of focus, phrases, words, descriptions of what she was writing. It was not an accident, although Suzanne Moore doesn't say that was only about her. That never, most certainly, was only about her. The Guardian is the worst kind of part of Fleet Street when it comes to pretending both ways. The Guardian pretends to be giving the platform to people of, in this kind of last few months, people of mainly African origin, but in Britain through Caribbean kind of journeys. It pretends to be getting on board the long overdue journey or acknowledgement of the struggle against racism by Black people. But it is doing the opposite. Because while it is coming across as being topically on board about the Black Lives Matter issues and movement, it is also hiding the truth every day about the racism that is going on right now by The Guardian, in The Guardian, through The Guardian. And the Boris graph has got its own version of the racist agenda. It is saying that Liz Truss, the dishonest conservative minister who was kind of over-promoted by David Cameron, giving a lecture, that is to say, she is expressing an opinion that racism should not be attacked and transgender kind of campaigners should not be allowed the privilege of being given publicity. And the Boris graph, of course, is giving the most positive gloss for Boris Johnson, saying that have a merry little Christmas. So this is a piece that the Guardian is not running as far as we can see, but the Boris graph is, which is that police funding is rising or has risen to record 15.8 billion. Police are to receive a big financial boost next year to fight crime and help hit a 2023 target of 20,000 extra officers. The record 15.8 billion pounds allocation represents a 4% rise. Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, said, "I am absolutely committed to giving the police the resources they need." This funding package delivers on that. Now, we are not going to talk about either Liz Truss or Priti Patel anymore in this edition, but we shall be doing later. Now, here is an absolute stupid moron called Robert Toombs, who says Great Britain never was and never will be a European country. Now, it is unspeakably stupid. What is it then? Is it part of Asia? Is it part of Australia? Is it part of America? Is it part of Africa? Where is Great Britain then, if it is not in Europe? How stupid. I mean, that is exactly what we said yesterday, that Fleet Street does not recognize the existence of the world. So the Little Englander has inflated itself to be the biggest Englander, meaning that Little England is as big as another continent. So it's the latest continent. That's what they're saying, the Brexiteers, morons. And where is this festering sickness coming from? Never heard of this Robert Toombs. And here is the introduction to the moron. Robert Toombs is the author of This Sovereign Isle, Britain in and Out of Europe, which will be published by Alan Lane in January. They've got an editorial on the Heathrow third runway, decision by the Supreme Court. They think that this will not take off. There will be problems. And the devil is given a whole page of splash in the Boris graph. The devil is the devil who wears Prada. That's Anna Wintour. And they're saying that Anna has always been their shiniest star. Her departure would cause drama. Is Anna Wintour in or out of vogue? Anna Wintour is a fascist. And this is not a word that we are using. She has been called a fascist for decades by those who have had the misfortune of having known her or having had to work alongside her. Which is why one of those wrote the book, The Devil Wears Prada, that is about Anna Wintour. Anna Wintour being a devil. That is the opinion of somebody who knew her very well. Now, here is a piece about a library. The Pepys Library in Cambridge, or Cambridge University. And they got a obituary about Richard Luckett, who was a scholar who is described as a scholar of history, music and language, who was the last ideal librarian of the Pepys Library, Cambridge. And there is another obituary underneath that about Georgina Mace, who is called Dame Georgina Mace, population biologist, who played a leading role in creating the Red List of endangered species. Now, what this positive, very upbeat biography on this ideal librarian represents is that the Boris Graf, as the rest of the Fleet Street, is truly a fantasy island of denial of the rest of the world. Every week, there are people, scholarly people, intelligent people, people with serious contribution to the thought and philosophies of their time and their area, their countries, are passing away. Never acknowledged. The Fleet Street papers not ever acknowledging their existence. And they wouldn't be, because they are in denial of the existence of the rest of the world. And there is a hope. This is the same line as the Guardian is peddling about the manipulations by Johnson and his cabal, saying that hopes rise for Brexit Accord, that is a deal with the European Union. And it claims that there has been progress on the main sticking points, that is the points of dispute. And they are connecting that trend with the rise in the value of the sterling, which they say has hit 2-year high. Page 25 of the Financial Times today, which is the page opposite the so-called editorial, is talking about Black Lives Matter and the tokenism by the US corporations, bosses who are engaged in overhyping their diversity propensities. And the writer, who is Brooke Masters, is pointing out that in California only, there is a law that recent law that requires companies to have women and diverse people on the boardroom. And it says that it calls for fines. California calls for fines for companies that do not comply. Now, although there is a lot wrong with the state of California and the state of New York and other so-called comparatively less racist and less kind of dictatorial and less right-wing states of the USA, when compared with the behavior and the narrative and the rhetoric of the Boris Johnson fronted cabal, those states with their limited and critical and kind of incomplete and far from complete kind of steps, like the one in California that I've just mentioned, when compared to those, the Britain, as so-called governed by the cabal fronted by Boris Johnson, or the cabal fronted by his predecessors, comes across as being in the dark ages. And Fleet Street is part of the narrative, dark ages narrative. That is what it is. And despite the fact that this piece appears in the Financial Times, but it doesn't. The fact that it does appear in the Financial Times doesn't mitigate against the racism of the Financial Times and the denial of the Financial Times, because it does not refer to the British racism and racist abstraction either in the companies or in the legal bureaucracies or in the Houses of Parliament. Now, in the House of Peers, that is otherwise known as House of Lords, House of Lords is fundamentally unethical, immoral expression and phrase. So we refer to it as House of Peers, because the use of the word Lord or Lords is totally offensive. It only belongs to the deity with the actual divinity and divine kind of entity. It does not ever apply to any human being or any earthly person. So, the House of Peers and the House of the so-called House of Commons They have, of course, they have got, now the House of Peers has got more faces of people with African and Asian backgrounds than it had even 5 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago. But despite the appearance or surfacing of those people with the regional or geographical and ethnic and nationality backgrounds related to African and Asian, the contents of the proceedings of the House of Peers remain unchanged. So, in the diagnosis of lead state that we have been making every day, we have not found any evidence of any behavior, any kind of contribution by any member of parliament or a member of the House of Peers that fundamentally challenges the fundamentals of the realities, the narratives, the agendas, the scripts of the political parties or of the houses, that is, House of Commons or House of Peers, or of the media, far less of the media, or of the institutions, academic institutions, colleges, universities, that challenge any initiative, comments or contribution or move by any member of parliament or by any member of the House of Peers who is black or African or Asian, or by anyone in the House of Peers, which is where people can belong to a thing called the crossbench, which means they are not members of any political party, or they are not sitting there as members of any political party. There is nothing that challenges the status quo. So the fact that there are people in the House of Peers with backgrounds from African and Asian countries and ethnicities and whatever makes no difference, except to themselves in the fact that they personally get the benefit, the allowance. But otherwise, in the substance of the role of the House of Peers, there is no difference. And it is the only times today that we have found this piece about the elderly told to keep away from family at Christmas in that way. It's not the completely confused and contradictory lying message that the Daily Borisgraph, the Daily Mail, Daily Express are carrying. It is quite clearly a clear and unambiguous call to the elderly. And this too is being attributed to Boris Johnson. So which ones of the 7 or 8 different position statements is the genuine one from him? There is an item about a baby alpaca at Brockett's Farm, Surrey, which is running a competition to find a suitable name for this one, which is a newborn cria. It's a baby alpaca. So the baby alpaca in Surrey. And there is a piece by the parent of the child who died of, the child called Ella, who died of air pollution, according to the coroner who ruled yesterday. And the Times says in a 2-page piece that most people will stay yet at home, but 1 in 4 persons is ready to break the rules. Long COVID strikes a fifth of virus sufferers, which is about 186,000 people in England had been suffering with coronavirus symptoms for at least 5 weeks in mid-November. Fatigue, headaches, and coughs were the symptoms most likely to linger, statisticians found. Now, even that item, which as compared to the rest of Fleet Street, is not helpful. Practically, that is, because neither that piece nor any of the other pieces in any of the Fleet Street papers is giving the A to Z that we've been talking about. The A to Z of the behavior of the thing. And there is a longer piece here about Rishi Sunak, the finance minister in the Boris Johnson fronted cabal, preparing the propaganda for the restoring of the cuts. And there is a piece in the Times as well about Jane Garby, who is the outgoing Joint Foster co-host of the Women's Hour program. That listeners of the radio program switch off when the channel airs any debate on transgender issues. And there is a Peter Brooks cartoon which sums up the corrupt message of Johnson, Gove, and who else is there? It doesn't look like Hancock, but it could be. there is the sleigh, the journey of the Father Christmas with the journey of death, the arrival of death, the death. That is what they're saying. And he's saying that, or they're saying in the Bible, there is no way of stopping us. So this is the message, because all the and there is a piece about the editorial piece is about the coroner's findings about the death of this child Ella by the environment, pollution. The poor air quality should galvanize ministers to fulfill their promise to introduce new legislation. Now, despite the fact that the Times is doing that editorial quite clearly, headline, as compared to the other Free State papers today, despite the fact that it is doing that, it is not telling the majority of the truth about the fact that even if there is a law in the statute book, that won't necessarily make any difference unless the rest of the state is galvanized in actually delivering protective measures to prevent air pollution and prevent other pollution and other toxicity. And that demands the involvement of all the power and the resources available at the hands of the state. For example, the truth that the Times is not telling about the state and about the Boris Johnson fronted cabal is exposed as being denied by Boris Johnson's fronted cabal in the context of and on the evidence of the Gavin Williamson's stupidity and attacks on the Greenwich Council. Greenwich Council correctly decided to shut schools within that borough because of the increasing risk of the spread of the COVID virus. And instead of respecting that, instead of welcoming that, Gavin Williams, the stooge imposed as the so-called Secretary of State at the expense of education in the Boris Johnson fronted cabal, threatened to take that council to court unless they kept the schools, open to infection of large numbers of pupils and staff. So that is openly forcing, by threat of court action as well, forcing the spread of infection on children and on staff in the school and parents who visit the school. And there is no irony expressed in any of the papers, including in the Times, in that editorial, that it should be including that editorial about the poor air quality linked death of the child Ella. And what Greenwich Council was doing was something that other councils should have done in London. So instead of saying to Greenwich Council, well done, you've done the right thing, and thank you very much for your practical concern for the health and safety of the children and the parents, and the staff, and that I, Gavin Williamson, will extend to all the schools in London boroughs, 32 London boroughs, the recommendation that they follow Greenwich. Instead of saying that, Gavin Williamson behaved as a dictator. And the Times is not mentioning that. And as far as I can see, there is not a single letter in the Times today that even takes any notice of the illegality of Johnson. So there is the heading. Let's look at the headings of the letters. So who are the people who are writing? Higher Education Policy Institute, Nick Hillman and Ben Figgis, head Ardingly College, West Sussex. And there is another one, is a member and former chairwoman of the trustees, Perrins Multi-Academy Trust. Now, school closures and the reform of education. That is the headline. And there are 3 letters in that under that headline. And these are letters that are not of any significance whatsoever. These are kind of the bandwagon letters that are not critical of the Johnson cabal. And they've got this Daily Express, the Beaverbrook Liar, that has got this piece. Again, over the top piece promoting Johnson and promoting another criminally overhyped image of Johnson as the source of the solution, whereas he remains the source of the problems. And there is a complete lying piece about a minister, Johnson minister acting to boost pension. That is a lie. And there is a piece on the inside pages about London shuts down with infections going up. Now, there is no explanation as to the relationship between 140,000 jobs in the past week, the vaccines that is, and the rise in the infection rates in London and elsewhere. And the Daily Express, of course, can be trusted to boost Johnson as the one that is in the right and the EU is in the wrong. And Leo McKinstry, a criminal and a liar and a racist, of course, has got the column in the Daily Express asking for, what is he asking for? Well, McNasty is unreadably corrupt. So not reading his piece except to say that he is capitalizing on the fact that in the early 1990s, he worked with Harriet Hattie Harman as her parliamentary aide. He was not an MP as far as I can recall. And so parliamentary aide is not really the correct expression, which should be reserved for only MPs who are aides to ministers or shadow ministers. And there is a piece about the birds dying out. Now, it doesn't record or refer to anything being done by human beings to cause these deaths of the birds, but there must be air pollution and other environmental disasters being inflicted on the birds by the behavior of human beings. Now, there is so many of Fleet Street titles, or almost all of those, carry pieces like this one about the deaths of species like birds and animals. That is fact. They don't run any regular pieces, but they do run pieces And the only consideration editorially behind their running this appears to be that they can appeal to people by coming across as being caring and concerned about the well-being and welfare of the species or the birds and the animals. But that's not true. That is not true about Fleet Street's editorial policies, because they don't connect, just like the Times pieces don't connect the effects of the environmental pollution together with the government policy and the policies of those who follow the government, that is the right-wing, anti-nature, anti-environment activities, agendas, and behavior. In fact, all these papers, with the possible exception of the Daily Mirrors to some extent, and the I newspaper to some extent, and the Guardian to a similar extent, with the exception constituted by the three of them together, the rest of Fleet Street tabloids, especially the Daily Mail, the Scum, the Express, the Star, and the Boris Graph, they actually support the policies of the government that are destroying the planet on the British Isles, the Great Britain. They don't, of course, acknowledge the existence of the world outside the Little England. But the parts of England, Little England, that are affected by the behavior and the conduct of the anti-environmentalist members in the population, these behavior, these acts, these attacks, these vandalisms, these violent acts are supported by the Fleet Street papers. So what's the point of talking by the Daily Express about the extinction, what they call apocalypse? But we don't call apocalypse because it's not the whole, all the kind of creatures. But whatever section of the species of the birds and the animals are being attacked by these destruction of the environment must be treated honestly and truthfully by the destruction and the attacks and the extinctions being connected with what is causing the extinction. The cutting of the woods, the trees, the plants, and the destruction of the environment by the HS2. And that kind of behavior, and the destruction of the trees in Sheffield by Sheffield City Council, and the various chemical experiments being conducted by the various capitalists, destroying the woodlands, the forests, and the trees, and making birds' lives impossible, unsustainable. And they're supporting these lying Fleet Street hunts, open torture of foxes by dogs unleashed by right-wing fascists in the name of a sport. Mass murders and mass tortures are being condoned by the Daily Express, the Daily Mail, the Scum, and the Daily Express, and the Daily Boris Graph, of course. And the fact of their support for these attacks is seen in the absence of any reporting of the truth about the behavior of local councils, which is where most of the massacres of the birds and the tortures of the foxes take place. The Boris Graph and the Express and the Mail and the Sun and the Star don't have any reports from anywhere in England about the cruelty policy even against cats and dogs by the councils. Councils treat animals as unworthy of protection, respect. The category in which local councils in England put cats is in the category of pests, pestilence. How dare the Daily Express, therefore, run this bogus opinion piece about the apocalypse of the birds? The Daily Express is complicit in the apocalypse, as it calls it. And apocalypse is not the right word, but we take the point. That is trying to emphasize a kind of linguistic emergency or convey a sense of emergency by that use of the word. But the emergency has been created by the complicity of the likes of the Daily Express with the perpetrators of the massacre of the birds and the attacks and the violence of the attitude against animals, including cats. Now, in none of these violations and criminality is there any evidence of the Labour Party behaving in any different way than the behavior of the Conservatives. The Conservatives are the ones that want to destroy the environment. The Labour Party pretends not to want to destroy the environment, but essentially the silence of elected Labour Party councillors and elected Labour kind of elected mayors in boroughs where the mayors have been foisted, and the silence of the absolute majority of elected Labour Party members of Parliament on all these shows that the Labour Party is dead itself, politically dead, ethically dead, morally dead, and redundant. We shall continue in part 2, definitely.